and marker.
So what is your name and occupation?
Really? My name is Bill Hogan. My occupation is I'm retired.
Did you get that?
Yep.
That's it.
It's
There you
okay?
go.
Okay.
And if you don't know who the fuck I am, we're in serious trouble.
You were saying that people are pretty much stunned when they hear that you could have gone to jail for talking to your best friends. I mean, what are people saying? How do they react to that?
I've told that to a lot of people, and I've never had anybody say, yeah, that makes sense. I get the same reaction from everybody. You got to be kidding me. No, that can't be. This is America. They can't do that. I said, well, they threatened to do it to me, put me in jail for 6 months for talking to 4 friends of mine. And they go, no, what about your First Amendment rights? I said, they tell me I don't have any First Amendment rights because it's not the government, it's the union doing this to me. And in my opinion, even if that's true, no union should have that kind of power because they have the ability to eliminate their opposition and opponents, and that's just something that should be looked at.
And the union wouldn't be in that position without the government and the consent decree and so on that they agreed to.
Yeah, well, the consent decree is what gave them that power. The initial power was, as we know, was to remove the mob from the union, and they accomplished that in a very short period of time, maybe the first 3 years. Then they found out that they had a home, that nobody was going to attack them or go against them, and they were on the payroll of the Teamsters Union, so they had the ability to stay there as long as they wanted, and they've been there for a long time, over 25 years. Now they've restructured, and is what I've been told, because I'm not allowed to talk to anybody, but I'm still not stupid, so now they say they're gone, but they still have some of the same people in place. Charles Carberry, who was the Chief Investigations Officer under the IRB, was just hired under a 5-year contract to continue harassing the Teamsters Union. And I think that should have stopped, and it should stop. It's wrong, and they're still terrorizing leadership who are afraid to do their job because they know they can be second-guessed by people who have no knowledge of the labor movement at all.
So when you talk about people being shot, got a problem?
Nope, we're good.
When you talk about people being shocked, I wonder if it would seem that people simply don't know this story. And if they don't know this story, then it means that the media has neglected the story.
Absolutely. People are shocked to hear the way they operate, but the thing that we fight all the time is that we're the Teamsters Union. And a lot of people have very little sympathy for the Teamsters Union. They've been brainwashed with the fact that the Teamsters Union is a bad organization that's had a lot of problems, mob-related, and whatever you want to go into, that people have this perception of what the Teamsters Union is all about. But they still do not understand how they can take our rights away from us, because we're Americans, then we're Teamsters. And for them to come in and take over the Teamsters Union and do what they did, it's a travesty, and it's been harmful to the entire labor movement. So Teamsters was the largest, most powerful labor union in the free world. And when I used to organize, one of the things I would say to people when I'd get a group together that we were trying to organize, I would tell them, the only union bigger than the Teamsters Union is the Soviet Union. And I don't think we'd have a problem taking them on either. So that was our persona. And we organized a lot of people, and they recognized the strength we had. Well, this independent review board has weakened the Teamsters Union. Their membership has dropped. Leadership is terrified to do their job because they can be second-guessed. And my case is a good one. We were organizing. They decided it was something else, and they made something out of it. And you can't beat them. Nobody's beat them except Gene Giacomo beat him once in a case where, but they came back and got him another way later on. So.
Yeah. So, but I am interested in why the American people are unaware of such a violation of constitutional rights on the scale of 1.3 million members not having the right of free speech and things like that. I mean, you experience press coverage while you were being targeted by the IRB.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on there? Where was the press falling short?
Well, the press from day one accepted this as the thing that should be done, to take the Teamsters Union down and get rid of the mob and all of that. And then they just played into that. Whatever position the IRB took, or the government took in this case, the press played that side up. In my case in particular, it was a case in Las Vegas. We were trying to put more people into the union. They decided that it was something else, not knowing what we were trying to do. And I did an interview with the New York Times, with Greenhouse, who was the labor editor. And I sat down, was very open. Anything he wanted to ask me, I would tell him just what it was. And I explained to him what we were doing. And we were taking people that were basically at a minimum wage. We were bringing them up into a first contract that would get them up somewhere in the $10, $11 range. Ultimately, after so many hours, they would become full-time members of the union. He took the government side of that I was trying to take a group of people and pay them $8.50 an hour and undermine the contract that was in place, which in fact there was no way to do that. You could not undermine the contract. It was a contract. We were trying to add people to it and increase the membership. But the news media just took the story, whatever the government said. We ran into that in court. Whenever we went into court, whatever position the government and the IRB was taking, they bought right into that, and they always looked at us like, well, they're self-serving and they're not truthful, and they just used that and did whatever they wanted to do to us. So we had no friends in the media. We tried several times. I did a lot of interviews, was very open, had nothing that I had to apologize for. I'm not embarrassed by what I was doing in Las Vegas. I was trying to help. They have the same problem today. They still can't supply enough Teamsters to cover the work out there. Other unions are taking the work away from the Teamsters Union. That's what we were trying to stop. So I don't apologize for what I did. They just screwed me because I could do it.
And they haven't really reported the fact that people are being expelled for life for talking to people. I mean, it's hard to believe that this could be happening without the general public knowing about it, isn't it?
Yeah, you would think so, but the general public tends to read the newspapers and read what they want to read and believe what they want to believe. Anyone, like I said earlier, anybody that I've told this story to, that they threatened to put me in jail for 6 months for talking to friends of mine, just cannot believe that. And they don't understand how something like that can happen. The general public, I don't think, really cares. You know, again, it's the Teamsters Union. We're not the Altar and Rosary Society, so it's not like, oh, we should have sympathy for the Teamsters. There's a perception that the Teamsters are getting what they deserve. What they lose sight of is that if you really research the Teamsters Union, you go back into history, sure, we had some problems. But the good we've done for working people in this country is second to none. We don't have to apologize to anybody. We created the middle class, basically. I mean, the Teamsters started pension funds, health and welfare funds, legal plans, all those types of things for working people. And we brought wages up. When we organized the jail, as an example, in Chicago, they were making like $17,000. When they threw me out, we had them up close to $46,000 a year. I don't think that's screwing people. I don't think that's taking advantage of working people. I think it's helping them. And the Teamsters have a great record for doing that.
Yeah, and tell me about I'm just curious about the correctional workers. They got a pretty rough job there, don't they?
Yeah, they got a terrible job there. And you think about it, when they leave work, they can carry guns. When they go into jail, they got to turn their gun in. They can't have the gun in jail. And it's a very tedious job. It's a stressful job. And they're dealing with the dregs of society. Every day you got to deal with that. And it's stressful. So they're dedicated people. They really are.
Yeah. So by contrast, you got very involved in film production. Help bring. We've talked about that a little bit. Do you have some particular memories from those days of some of the interesting productions that went on? Some of the actors you met that stick out in your mind today?
Yeah, I was fortunate in that. I met a lot of them, and we worked that. Initially, going back into the 60s, Chicago was not a film mecca. The movie industry started in Chicago initially, and then it all moved to California. But in the 60s, they came in here and they did a couple of movies. They did Gaily and The Sting, but they would come here and shoot for 2 or 3 weeks and they were gone. So we would get a few people on there driving vans, driving people around. And I remember I went out to the set with my wife when they were shooting The Sting, and she wanted to meet Robert Redford. So we went out there and I introduced her to Robert Redford. And I said, "This is my wife, Jenny." He said, "Oh, Jenny, nice to meet you." I said, "No, it's Ginny." And she, "Leave it alone." She hits me. "Don't worry about it." I say, if he's going to say your name, he's going to say it right. So, but most of them are very nice people. I mean, I made some nice friends through the industry, and we worked it after that. We started working with the film offices, the state film office, the city film office, and there were some good people there that wanted to increase the business. So we had several meetings. We pulled the unions together, which worked better. I'd put it up against any city in the country where we worked as a team. And the idea was to bring production in here and put our members to work, and we were very successful at that.
And it's a completely different world here now with television productions and major film productions.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's going on now?
Absolutely. No, well, we had some people come in from Toronto who had a studio up there, and they bought the old Ryerson steel plant, which I organized many years ago with Riley. Me and Riley organized Ryerson. And then Ryerson closed. They bought the property and started building sound stages. So now I think they're up to like 16 sound stages over there. And recently we had 8 television shows shooting all at the same time. So it's increased the workload here for all of the unions. So everybody has benefited from that. And it's been good for the city, and it's good for the state, and it brings in a lot of revenue.
So tell me about how people reacted when you started getting coverage in the paper that they were first that they were going to trustee you, and then that you were going to be expelled, and also you had all kinds of friends in politics and in other union leaders, people involved in civic endeavors like the Tourism Bureau and so on. Were they pretty much shocked, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've made a lot of friends over the years in the movie industry, the trade show industry, and like you said, civically. When they did this to me, I was the president of the Joint Council, so I dealt with every politician in the city, had some good relationship with them, and they were shocked. They couldn't understand it because they knew me, and they thought there's no way that he's going out to Las Vegas to sell out some members. So they just couldn't buy that at all, but they couldn't help. That was the problem. If they could have helped, I think a lot of them would. I had legal battles going on. They came to fundraisers. They helped raise money for me to fight my legal battles. So they cared about me, but there was only so much they could do because it's a system that you can't challenge. You can challenge it, but you can't go anywhere with it. You're not going to win. Nobody wins. So you recognize that at some point. And ultimately, after my wife passed away, my lawyer came to me and said they wanted to settle with me on my threat to go to jail. And I said, well, what do they want? And we worked out a settlement agreement because I could have kept going, but I couldn't beat them, and it would have just been more legal fees. So at some point, you got to cut and run and do what you got to do. So.
Well, you stood up to them. You never said what they wanted to hear.
No, that was one of the things they requested when we made the settlement. They wanted me to fully cooperate with them. I said I'd never cooperate with people like this because they're terrorists is what they are. And you want to put them in a union and call them terrorists? That's what they are. They terrorized this union. I saw guys that were really strong leaders just fold up like accordions, scared to death because the IRB is coming. One guy in particular, I'm not going to mention his name, but when he heard they were coming into his office, he put up a picture of Ron Kerry thinking that would save him, because we weren't Ron Kerry people. But I thought, well, Ron Kerry's in bed with the IRB, so they're going to like this to see Ron Kerry's picture in my office, So, I mean, that's wrong that people felt that way, but that's how some of them viewed it.
They were very much. They were, instead of independent arbiters, there to monitor corruption. They were taking sides in union elections, right?
Yeah, there's stuff that happened that we can't prove, and it's, people just say it's self-serving, and it's hard to deal with what happened, really, because we feel like the first election they stole it on us, but you can't prove that. So I mean, you can feel it, and you could see things that happened and recognize that he was their guy. There's no question about it. They more or less handpicked him, and I think Gene Giacomo went into some of the stuff that his background had that they were aware of, and they still pushed him. So they felt like this is a guy that's going to come in and help them, and he did. I mean, he did their bidding, and ultimately they had to take him out when they had the second election, and they found what was going on, and the money that was changing hands, and they could no longer cover him. It got too ridiculous for him, so they had to take him down. But prior to that, I mean, they just, we feel they stole the first election. The second election, we proved they stole it. So that's why they had to have a new election to get rid of him. But when they're doing that, it's very hard to say, these people are on our payroll. We're paying them to do this to us.
We found a letter from Rudy Giuliani that immunized, offered immunity to Ron Kerry,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to 1987.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, wouldn't you think, that the IRB would be promoting someone with that kind of connection?
Absolutely. That was what we were all questioning. When some of the stuff came out, and I mean, at that time, I was lobbying against the IRB, okay? And, I don't apologize for my history. My dad started a local, so when I was born, I was a Teamster. I didn't know that. And it's very much like a policeman or a fireman. Your dad's a policeman, your dad's a fireman. That's all you're exposed to your whole life. As you grow up, you can go into the fire department, police department, you're going to find sons, grandsons. They attack us, Teamsters, because we followed in the footsteps of our parents. And I don't think that's fair or deserving. My dad started a local, he built it up. I went to work for him, and I worked hard. I built my own reputation, and they attacked us for nepotism. We ran that local for 40 years. Every 3 years, we had to run for our office under the membership coming in and voting for us. And we got elected every 3 years. If we were selling the members out, weren't doing the job, we'd have been gone. But this is the attitude they took, that this is wrong. We have to go after these people, and it's just wrong.
After a while, they knew that the bad guys were gone,
Mm-hmm.
the real problem,
Mm-hmm.
and it became sort of like routine issues that could have been dealt with by the Labor Department or the Justice Department if somebody
Exactly.
was really out of line. Why did they stick around?
Because they could. There was no way to get rid of them. There was no sunset clause in the consent decree. So they found out that initially they were just supposed to have an election, and then after 3 years they were going to be fading away, maybe monitor the next election, and they found out we can do whatever we want here. And they just kept taking on more and more. They were not going to get into the running of local unions. All this was sold to us when that consent decree was signed. There were meetings all across the country. Billy McCarthy was the general president. He called all the locals in. They spoke about what this was going to be, and everybody's listening to it. And no, this is not going to affect the locals. This is just to have an election for officers of the union. So we didn't like it, but we felt, well, this is what they did. Well, then we go to convention. We voted it out anyway, and they just ignore that. And that got me to where I started to lobby, because I felt this is wrong. These people found a home. They're bilking the Teamsters Union out of millions of dollars every year. They're attacking people that are trying to do their job. They have no recourse. They're going to one judge in New York. Nobody's going to win there. You know that. So I lobbied. I had Henry Hyde at the time. He wrote a letter to Janet Reno. I had some labor leaders here in Chicago, head of the Chicago Federation of Labor. I'm getting them. Bob Healy, Mike Breslin, head of the construction trades. They wrote letters on my behalf to Janet Reno. They lobbied Henry Hyde. They lobbied other politicians. And it would go up the chain and come right back down, and now we're monitoring this and we're watching it closely. Nothing happened. So when they recognized that there's nobody going to take them out, they just found a home. And now they've changed the system recently, is what I've been told. Hoffa had it in the magazine that Teamsters Union and the IRB is gone and all that, that's a bunch of bullshit. Because now you've got just different entity doing the same damn thing. They hired Carberry for 5 more years. DeGenova moved the business from Jones Day law firm to his law firm. So they're the people now doing it. I have no idea how it's structured now. I can't get anybody to tell me. And I can't talk to anybody that's there, so just trying to pick it up on the outside. How is this working now? How much money are they still bilking out of this union? And I can't get those answers. So they're still controlling this union. They're still on the payroll. They're not gone.
So tell me, you still get together with other Teamsters that are retired on a regular basis?
Yes, we do. The old retired Teamsters group. We get together, and these are guys that helped build this union. And we agonize over what we've seen happen to this union, because we were there when it was powerful. And we recognize the strength we had. Now we see it's just weak. And the people that are there, well, I can't talk to them anyway, but I still have some friends that are there that I'm not allowed to talk to this day. I'm barred for life. I can't talk to Teamsters. If they talk to me, they put themselves in jeopardy of losing their job. That's wrong. I am not a criminal. I have no criminal background. I have nothing that I've done criminal. And then I read the newspaper every day and I see some guy murdered somebody. 3 years later, he's back out on the street. I'm barred for life for talking to friends of mine because they said I was trying to sell out some members, which I couldn't do. So when we get together, that's the kind of stuff we talk about, how pathetic it is, what they've gotten away with, and there's no way we can get any relief. And again, nobody cares about us, and it's sad because we are American citizens too. And if we had some bad guys, everybody's had bad guys. I'm a Catholic. How do you think I feel about when I see a priest and what they were doing and all that kind of stuff? But I didn't quit the Catholic Church, and I don't criticize the whole Catholic Church because of that. So the Teamsters Union, because we had some bad apples, they just criticize all of us, and we're all bad. And it's just not fair.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff there. Ginny took it hard. Tell me about what she went through. I know it's a painful subject for you, Bill, but tell me about it.
Yeah, that is painful. You can bring that right back to me, George. That is painful. She suffered the most, unfortunately. She was a good lady. Oh, God. We were together for 48 years. What they did was wrong.
She wrote that letter.
She wrote a letter to Carberry, I believe, and just took him on for what he was doing. They went after my kids. That really upset her. When that happened, she had a stroke. And then she was diagnosed with cancer. She went through 3 major surgeries. And she was willing to accept what they were doing to me, you know, just because of the positions I was in and the fact that I was a target. She used to tell me, why don't you just shut up, be quiet, don't go after him. And I said, I can't. That's not my makeup. I'm a little Irish stubborn bastard that if something's wrong, I'm going to challenge it. This is wrong, and it's wrong today. And she tried to get me to back off, but she knew I wouldn't do it. She knew I wasn't going to back off. So when they came after me, she was willing to accept that. But then when they went after my kids, that was tough for her to accept. That was crossing the line with a mother, you know. So that was tough.
Yeah, and Bobby showed a lot of guts. I thought, you know, when I've understood that he was getting all kinds of advice that he shouldn't challenge the trusteeship.
Mm-hmm.
He ignored that advice and plowed on ahead and actually got the local back, right?
Yeah, well, I was proud of him. I mean, he's a Hogan, so he again saw it was wrong. When they trusteed the local, they had the local in trusteeship for 18 months. In that 18-month period, they couldn't find a dime missing. They couldn't charge us with anything. They came up with some bullshit stuff just to have a hearing, but never amounted to anything. So after 18 months, Bobby went into federal court. During this 18-month period, they took the treasury, the local, down by 500,000. They lost 3,000 members. So he went into federal court. He was advised by labor lawyers in Chicago, oh, don't do that. You're taking on the IRB. You can't win. He took it on, and a federal judge here in Chicago looked at it and said, I see no reason why this local should be in trusteeship, and he ordered an election. and Bobby won it. And there were people saying, well, Hogan shouldn't run because of all the bullshit. So no. The answer is here, Hogan has to run. If we're that bad, then they're going to vote against us. Bobby won it overwhelmingly. So I was proud of him.
And increased his majority going forward.
Yeah, he brought the Treasury back up. He put more members back in the Union, and then back they come again. Trustee it again. Now, if you analyze that, it seems like somebody has a vendetta. Because this seems to be like a Hogan thing. Because the IRB felt when they got me the first time when they trusteed the local, I retired. And the reason I retired was Ron Carey was there. So I figured there's no sense me coming back. I'm not going to be able to do anything. He's just going to come after me again. When Bobby won the local back, he asked me to come out of retirement and come back. So I agonized over it a little bit, as did my wife, but then I said, all right, I'll come back. I didn't do anything wrong. So I came back, went back to work for the local, and that pissed off the IRB. It was like they were rid of me and I came back. Now, not only did I come back, but a local in Elgin, local 179, Bob White, who was running that local, said, I have an opening on my board. And I'd like to put you on my board because you have to be a member of a executive board to hold a position of joint council president. So he put me on his board so I would have a position as a member of an executive board. And the guy running the joint council stepped down and I went back into the joint council. Now, that didn't happen because I was a goof. Wasn't respected. That was because people did respect me. And I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass, but I had a reputation of helping people and doing good for people. And they recognized that and they wanted me back. And the labor movement wanted me back, other unions. So I went back in there and that was one that really fried Carberry's ass because he was rid of me and now I'm back. So that's when they put a big target on my back and said, we're going to get him ultimately. That's going to happen. I just know that was what the system was. So Bobby ran the local, brought it back up, and then all of a sudden, here they come again. We got to trustee this local again now. In the meantime, they charged me in Las Vegas, attempting to negotiate a substandard agreement. And I, to this day, don't understand how you can determine something's substandard until it happens. And I testified to that. I said, how do you say I was doing a substandard agreement? There was no agreement. It was never finalized. When do you determine that? Well, that's what they thought was going to happen. So that was enough to screw me and bar me for life, which is really sick. So Bobby came back, built the local back up. They came after him again. Now our friend Hoffa's in there. And Hoffa turned on us. There's no question in my mind that he turned on the Hogan family. And I did a lot of good for that guy. I worked hard for him. My wife was sick. I left her home sick, going out campaigning for him. I raised as much money as he raised to help get him elected. And a lot of people feel that he felt I was a threat to him, and I wasn't. I told him many times, I have no interest in your position. I says, two things happen to Teamster presidents usually. They either die or they go to jail. So I have no interest in either one of those, and I like Chicago, so just leave me alone. I don't want to leave Chicago. I love Chicago. I hate Washington. But there were people telling him that I was a threat. He bought into it, and I think that, again, all I can tell you is what my feelings are. And this is a lot of other Teamsters. If you talk to other Teamsters, you'll establish people saying that he viewed that they viewed that, and that's why this happened. So now the second time they trusteed a local, again, they found no money missing, they found no criminal activity, they found nothing. The only thing they found is Bobby didn't fire Bob Riley for talking to me. Somebody that he called uncle his whole life, he didn't fire him. So that was the big charge they had. But then to get rid of the Hogans, the only way he could do it was dissolve the local, and that's what Hoffa did. And this is a local that had almost 13,000 members, was full of cash, was sound, was organizing, one of the best locals in the country. He took it apart, because that way he could get rid of it. Because if they'd had that trusteeship, after 18 months again, if Bobby would have run, he'd have won it again, and they knew it. So they had to get rid of the Hogans. The only way they could do it was to get rid of the local.
Do you think both Hoffa and the IRB were one mind on that?
As far as I'm concerned, they were, yeah. Again, I can't prove some of this stuff, but if you just look at how the pieces fall together, there's a puzzle there, but you can put it together, and it's almost a lot of people, too, they say, well, Hoffa's in bed with them, that's the reason they stay. If I'd have been elected Secretary-Treasurer with Hoffa when I ran with him, I'd have been all over getting rid of them. they can't justify why they're there if you really take them on. They're taking so much money out of there, and you stated it earlier. We got the Labor Department, you got the Justice Department, you got the Labor Board. These entities monitor every other labor union in this country. They don't even go near the Teamsters Union because we got our own little committee that screws us, and they don't need any of the rules that the others have. I would much rather have had the Justice Department and the Department of Labor come into Las Vegas and look at what I was doing, and the Labor Board. And all three of them would have walked away and said, this is nothing. But I didn't have that opportunity. I had this little group that could do whatever they wanted, and they're still doing it.
So whatever happened to Tommy Ryan?
Well, Tommy Ryan it's a sad story. Tommy was a good guy. You know, I think we mentioned this before. When we were running with Hoffa, they trusteed 3 locals, my local, Tommy Ryan's, and T.C. Stone in Texas. 3 people running on Hoffa's slate. The IRB had no problem with that. You know, hey, these guys are running with Hoffa, so we trusteed our locals. And Tommy was one of those locals that they trusteed. So then they went after Tommy, and Tommy had a little screw up. He used a credit card. He caught it himself, corrected it. They found it. I think he even identified it for him, and they threw him out. Then he went to a fundraiser for one of the guys running for vice president out of New Jersey. They found out he was there. Then they barred him for life. And Tommy was in Vietnam. He won a Bronze Star, and now they can throw him out. They can take his job away from him. He fought for this country, and then they just took his rights away from him. I mean, this is a guy that's a hero. Fought for the country, and this little group that has more power than anybody, I don't know anybody has as much power as they have within an organization. They took him out. They didn't care about his Bronze Star or whatever else he did. He was a target, out he went. You know, barred him for life. So it's sad. Tommy was a good guy.
Same way they didn't care that you had brought in the major film productions and made Chicago the hub in the you know, in the conventions and you know, expositions.
They could care less. I think I gave you a file on that. I was one of the magazines in the convention industry. At one point, they voted me one of the top 25 influential people in the industry. That's pretty good for a Teamster official. I mean, I was the chairman of the Convention Bureau for a year. I was chairman-elect before that. I was a secretary before that. I was on the board for 25 years, I think. And that's not because I was doing something wrong. I think it was because I was helping a situation. I helped make work rule changes, make Chicago a more friendly city. When people identified stuff for us that they felt was wrong, if it was wrong, we made corrections. And a lot of the problems we had in the early 60s was that nobody was talking to us. Teamsters Union was like all the other unions down there. We're doing our own thing. The industry's not talking to us other than when they have to, negotiate a contract and put a show in. And a guy became the chairman, his name was Tom Maher, and he owned Continental Bus. And he called me and he says, could we have a meeting with the union people and the industry people and talk about what's going on here? I says, let me talk to the other union guys. So I reached out to all the other union guys. They said, yeah. I says, it's going to be kind of like the Lions, you know, being thrown into the Coliseum there. So I said, well, let's go see what happens. So he set a panel up, I believe it was at the Palmer House, and we had all the unions up at the table, and then they had industry people out there, and we started talking. And we started to open up some communications as to how we're all in the same business, and it's in our best interest to bring the work in here. And, you know, as a result of that, we formed a labor committee, which I was the quasi-chairman of, and I spoke around the country at major trade show association meetings after that because of that breakdown. And we talked about it that, you know, you guys go to these sessions around the country, you talk about all the segments of the industry, and you always have a panel on labor. But the thing that's always missing there is there's nobody from labor there. So you get in the room and you talk about all the ills, but you have no way of solving them until you bring people in that are going to try and help you solve them. And that kind of woke everybody up. I said, it's like having a football game and you just don't tell the quarterback what the game plan is. And we're the quarterback. Nothing happens without us. We make that show happen. We bring everything in. We set it up. So if you don't tell us the game plan, you know, we're not going to get anywhere. So we started to communicate. As a result of that, that's what ultimately wound up getting me into the chairmanship and getting me on the board. because they recognize that, I might be a Teamster official, but I still have common sense. I know what's good for my members. I know what's good for industry. And when you work together, you can't beat it. It's a combination that you see all kinds of success.
And, just to review, McCormick Place was in pretty bad shape for a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So then trying to point out the difference between, you're talking about correcting the problem. I want to identify the problem a little bit.
Yeah, well, the problem was that they felt like they were being abused. Trade show people come in here, they had to pay people, you had to give tips to people. We actually had some people in there that had supposed mob connections, and we caught a lot of heat over that. And this happened based on taking the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction, the trade show movie industry division, belonged to a local that was not functioning properly. So it went out of business, basically, and my dad went to Ray Scheschling, I believe at the time, and said, I want that jurisdiction. So when we took the jurisdiction, this is going back to the amphitheater. There was no McCormick Place at the time. This is going back early 60s. So we go down and look around. There's no Teamsters. It's carpenters, it's decorators. Everybody's doing the Teamster work, loading, unloading the truck. So my dad got a guy, put him in there, and says, all right, we're going to take our jurisdiction back. So we had to fight for it because these guys weren't willing to give it up that easy. These are the good old days, okay? You don't have that anymore. That's when labor, people have no idea the toughness it took to build unions. They think everybody just gets in now. You get a contract, you make $25 an hour, you get all these benefits. All that shit didn't come easy. You had to work for it. We had to work to get this jurisdiction back. So we brought some guys in. There were some roughnecks. And they told the carpenters, all right, we're going to start doing our work. And there was a couple of little fist fights and stuff. And they finally got the message that the Teamsters are coming in. And we built it up to we had like 50 members. And we started claiming our jurisdiction. And then the government got all over us because of all the heat about the trade shows are being abused and all that. So my dad and I had a meeting, and he says, we're going to get rid of some of these guys. So we took 6 guys out of the union at the time. And we offered them jobs in warehouses, so we weren't taking their livelihood. But they sued us. I got sued for $250,000. My dad did. At that time, that was like $20 million today. So I thought, man, I wish I could pay $250,000. I thought at that time I'll never make that much. So we had some rough times there, but ultimately we started to move in the right direction, and we built it up to when they trusteed us the first time, we had over 300 people there, and we had a very good reputation. We had shows would come in, and we'd make up T-shirts for our members, welcome, Hardware Association show, or welcome whatever the show was, so people would feel comfortable. Hey, these ain't the enemy. And I used to tell them, when I'd speak at some of these meetings, I'd say, we're not sitting there waiting for you to come in. So if you say something out of line, we can throw your exhibit in the lake. That doesn't make any sense. We're here to help you. You ask us, and I had a show manager get up, and he says, well, you know how I handle my union problems? I said, I have no idea how you handle your. He says, I don't. I deal with the contractor. I said, shame on you. And this is in a meeting with a whole bunch of people. I said, shame on you. You ought to be ashamed. And he backs up. What are you talking about? I says, wouldn't it be much nicer if you came into Chicago and you had a problem, you could pick up the phone and call me direct and we could talk? I said, wouldn't that be a better situation than you going through a third party that's going to tell you some bullshit about me because they just blame the unions for everything? Contractors didn't like some of the stuff I used to say, but I said, that's what happens. Because the easiest thing for a contractor is if there's a beef, that's the union rules. Ain't no rule like that. They tell them that. No exhibitor is going to challenge it because the contractor said it. So those are the kind of things we broke down. It took time, but we broke those things down, and it became a much better thing for everybody.
That's the best explanation I've heard, and we've addressed this in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
That really gives us an idea. Mm-hmm. Now, the broader public, the people that are going to be watching this film, what should Americans learn or be concerned about based on what happened in the Teamsters?
Well, my feeling on that, I've thought about that, and how do you deal with this? Because again, you start with the fact that we're Teamsters, okay? So I try to divorce myself of that thought process. Let's forget for a moment that we're Teamsters. This is wrong. I don't care who the hell they're doing this to. This is wrong. What they're doing, the way they're doing it, the way they've done it, and the way they're continuing to do it is just wrong. This is a great country. I mean, we've got all our problems, and going forward from here, we may have some more. We don't know, you know. But it's not what it used to be. But still, anybody that looks at this should look at it from a position of what's right and what's wrong. Forget about who the entity is. Let's look at what they've done and how they've done it, and it's just wrong. It's unfair. It's unjust. I'll go in court in front of a judge and all that and do whatever. If I did something criminal, charge me. There's a process. This system is just dead wrong. There is
It goes around the justice system.
It goes around the whole justice system. You can't go to. You can go to court. I went to court when they threw me out. We went to the Second Circuit in New York. I think you were there, and that's when I finally saw how justice works. And what I saw in that courtroom was my attorney, who was excellent. And when they did the case in Las Vegas, he stated to me that, Bill, you're going to win this. This is ridiculous. They should be embarrassed for bringing these charges. And then they threw me out for life. He was in shock. So now we appeal it. We go to the Second Circuit. He prepared great briefs, presents all that to the court. They ignored everything he said and took what Carberry and the IRB said as law. We're unfaithful, or we're untrue, we're not credible, whatever you want to say. That's how they just dismiss everything we say, dismiss it right out, and take whatever the government's position was and screw us. And that's the part that people should be concerned with. If they can do this to us, what's to prevent them from doing it to other people?
Well, the Constitution is a reference point here too. I mean, we have a right not to incriminate ourselves, the Fifth Amendment.
Yep.
We have a
Yep.
First Amendment, a right of assembly,
Yep.
a right of free speech.
Yep.
I mean, isn't this basically unconstitutional?
As far as I'm concerned, it is, because what those rights you just spelled out, we don't have as Teamsters. Because if they call you in for an interview and you say, I'm going to exercise my Fifth Amendment right, you're going to get barred within 10 minutes. You're going to be gone. You cannot exercise your Fifth Amendment rights. And that goes back to too much power in an entity like that. So we have no constitutional rights under this consent decree, and now this new system they have, same thing. I don't really know how it's functioning. I can't find out. Nobody can tell me. All I know is they're still on the Teamster payroll and they're still screwing people that would be much better off going before the Department of Labor or the Labor Board to have their case heard. In my case in Las Vegas, if I was doing what they said I was doing, which is bullshit, and the Labor Board would have come in there, the worst case scenario would have been a cease and desist. And all that would have been is stop what you're doing, and it would have been over. I would have never been barred. I would have never been thrown out of the Teamsters Union. I might still be there. As old as I am, I might still be there because I'm actually younger than Hoffa.
Fellows, you see some obvious question I'm not asking? Now that this is on top of a whole lot of other interviews that we've already conducted. I think we've gotten what we came for, unless you some burning question that you haven't asked.
The only thing that I would consider doing is maybe rephrasing the last question and then having you like repeat the first part of the question, because since your audio is
he
a little
agreed
bit,
with me instead of
right. So if you were to go over the last section again in such a way that you restate the part about how they're infringing on your First and Fifth Amendment rights, we might be able to get a clearer statement and something we can use a little bit better.
Yeah, we can be using
Okay, is that okay
bits
with
and
you, Bill?
pieces of both.
Just-
but
what are the constitutional things that they're trampling on here?
Okay. I didn't state that properly, or what?
No,
We got a good
you agreed with me.
Yeah.
I stated it, and then
Oh,
you
okay.
said, yeah, you're
So
right.
you want me to do it without you
Yeah,
asking me?
so more or less what we have on camera is you saying I agree, and then
You
without
elaborated
ever
somewhat,
really knowing
but-
what the question is.
Yeah.
This asshole.
And the other thing is, while you're answering, like that was a question that you got kind of energetic about. Try to touch your shirt a little bit less, and like basically just don't move your left arm as much. You
Jeez.
should get really clear.
Got some fucking Velcro?
You have to be immobilized.
Not immobilized.
It looks really nice.
I got you.
And it
Everything's
sounds
looking
really
nice,
clean.
and it
Alright.
sounds really nice.
Okay.
So
Well, that's good to hear.
Do you want to just pick this up on my
Yeah,
own
pick
then,
it up,
without the
yeah,
question?
When you're ready.
Perfect.
My position in looking at this as far as the Constitution of the United States is concerned, and our rights under that Constitution, they were taken away from us. I saw many people go before the Independent Review Board. They wanted to exercise their rights under our Constitution, and they couldn't do that. They cannot take the Fifth Amendment. They can ask you about anything. It doesn't have to even refer to union business. They can ask you about your personal life. If you refuse to answer any of their questions, you're going to get barred for life. So they took our First Amendment rights of free speech away from us, and they took our constitutional rights of the right to refuse to answer if it's something that you don't feel is comfortable for you or that they need to know. But they took that away from us. So they violated our First and Fifth Amendment rights, and they continue to do that today, even under this new entity, as far as I know.
And this, if they can do it to you,
They can do it to me, they can do it to anybody, and that's why people have to be concerned that this is the government out of control. And they say, it was signed by the Justice Department, and then they turn it into this union entity that, as far as I know, they told me that they took my First Amendment rights away from me, that I can't talk to Teamsters. I'm barred for life from talking to Teamsters. And I was told this was the union doing this to me. But when they charged me and I was threatened with going to jail, I went in front of a federal judge. It wasn't the Teamsters Executive Board that I went in front of. I went in front of a federal judge. And the last time I checked, that was the government. So I feel the government took my First Amendment rights away from me.
okay. Good, good. We got it from a whole lot of different angles, and we got a lot of stuff to work with. What you guys can think about is how we